House Republicans are pushing back after the Senate passed a housing bill with a strong bipartisan majority. Joining us right now is Republican Congressman French Hill of Arkansas. He is the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, which, by the way, came up with its own bill that also passed with strong bipartisan support. Congressman Hill, thank you for being with us this morning. It's good to see you.
You bet, Becky. Good to be with you.
Talk me through this. I know you all had your own bill that was going to be the bill that opened up housing. It did pass by strong bipartisan vote. I think it was 390 to 9. The Senate kind of did their own version of the bill, passed it by a vote of 89 to 10, also has the support of the Trump administration. Where does this leave things? Because what it sounds like, there are certainly some House Republicans who are not in favor of the Senate bill. What happened?
Well, Becky, it's good to be with you and talk about this important subject. You know, for two Congresses now, Tim Scott in the Senate and myself in the House, we've worked to find a good bipartisan bill that focuses on the supply side of cutting costs of building new housing, deregulating burdens that lead to higher costs on a per square foot basis, increasing financing to housing, both at the consumer level and in the construction level. And in the 118th Congress, we had a bill together called Road to Housing that I introduced in the House and he introduced in the Senate. In this Congress, last year, the Senate marked up a bill that was called Road to Housing that was not taking that same supply side approach. So in the fall, the House, we did our own bill that focused on no new major spending programs, but to instead make HUD more accountable, create more supply through deregulating and removing barriers inside the HUD programs like building codes, making the community development block grant program eligible for housing, adding how banks could invest in community development in a major way, and then finally also freeing up community banks from the burden so that they can do more home construction lending. That was the approach we took. So housing has strong support in both chambers, and what Tim Scott and I need to do now is reconcile those differences, and I believe we can do that.
What's so different in the Senate bill? I hear what you're saying about increasing finance. I know that that's involving small banks and credit unions to be able to do some of those things. Right. I get deregulation, but what do you find so problematic about the Senate bill? What specifically?
Well, there's increased, there are new programs created there that I don't believe have the support of the House. These are programs that we have voted down in the House over the past decade, so that's a concern.
Programs
they also have a ban
on housing. I'm sorry, just to be really clear on that.
And also building new programs like putting a FEMA disaster recovery program and agency inside HUD. That's an approach that the House doesn't support on a technical policy area. But some of the big differences are in President Trump's goal of banning large institutional investors from buying single-family homes. There's some real problems with the drafting language in the Senate bill that, in fact, the mortgage bankers and the home builders are opposed to the Senate bill. And we'd like to see that language corrected. Keep President Trump's goal.
Can you say specifically? I mean, President Trump has been pretty vocal about the idea that he does not want institutionals being able to buy up a lot of homes. What in the language is most problematic?
Well, it requires all homes built to rent to be sold within 7 years of construction. It has a mandate that the federal government says that a private sector firm who builds housing for rent, and this is increasing housing supply, of course, across the country where many millions of people, probably a third of home formations are rental rather than buying a home first out. Maybe it's because they're transitory in one city or another, or they're saving money for a house. You know, there are a million reasons why one rents. And this to force the private sector to sell those houses in some arbitrary date of 7 years, I think, is a real problem for a lot of members of the House. And also the Senate put a ban on central bank digital currencies, which is supported by the House, but they put a sunset on it, meaning that after 2030, the government could go forward with a central bank digital currency, and that has some problems for members of the House as well. So there are narrow differences, but there are substantive differences, and I believe we can work them out.
So far, it seems like the House leadership is supporting your push for reconciliation, but Reconciliation is pretty complicated, pretty difficult, and pretty rare. What has Tim Scott said about any of this? How likely do you think reconciliation is?
Well, as I say, the areas are narrow. I talked to Chairman Scott last week. I told him about the issues in the Senate bill as they went forward with their vote, and he acknowledged that working that out through a conference or an informal conference was a key possibility, and certainly that's what John Thune said yesterday when asked by that in the press. And in the House, all the caucuses groups, such as the Republican Study Committee, the largest, the Main Street Group, all support the House working with the Senate to amend the Senate bill and make it more acceptable to the House so we can get a good, strong vote in the House, just like we did on our own bill, with 390 votes in favor. You don't see that much in the House these days. 390 votes for a bill that focused on supply-through enhancement to community banks and a deregulatory approach to the HUD programs and holding HUD accountable. All those provisions were taken out in the Senate bill as well.
Chairman Hill, there is that old saying, and I've heard it attributed to a lot of different people, including Senator Ted Kennedy and others, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Is that the case here, or do you think that this bill passed by the Senate does more harm than good?
Well, look, this is actually regular order Congress. I don't really understand what's so stunning that the Senate passes a bill and the House passes a bill and we reconcile those differences.
Well, only that the
through
Trump
a formal or
administration
informal
specifically signed off on the Senate bill. That makes it a little more complicated, I think.
Well, look, we appreciate what President Trump's done on deregulating housing. He had 2 executive orders Friday that are actually contained many of the provisions in our 21st Century Housing Act and also in our Main Street Capital Access Act. So he knows the connection between community banking relief to housing supply, and that was recognized in his EOs that he released on Friday. But I believe that us working together to find a better bill benefits President Trump. I'm sure he wants his key provision that he's talked about in the State of the Union on banning institutional ownership from too many single-family homes to work and not create a supply problem, but actually be a positive contributor to both building home supply, but making sure individual families have a chance to buy a house. So I believe getting the language right benefits President Trump significantly.
Congressman, it's Andrew. Before we let you go, and it's a pivot, but it's in the headlines this morning, so I think a lot of people are trying to understand it, especially inside the Republican Party. This resignation by Joe Kent yesterday, who was a top counterterrorism official, resigning over the Iran war. There's a number of folks inside the party and even folks that are close to the president who seem to be taking a similar position to his, and I'm curious just your reaction to it.
I saw Director Kent's resignation letter yesterday. I was surprised by it. I noted, for example, that Iran has been a domestic terror threat and an international and regional terror threat, obviously, for 5 decades. I understood his reticence and concerns about the scale of the war, but this is a decision I think that Israel and the United States have taken that in the long run is in the best interest of safety and security here in the homeland as well as in the region, which is to completely neuter Iran's nuclear ambitions, their ballistic missile threat in the region and beyond, and their ability to export terror through their proxy groups. And I noted just overnight, UAE, made the same point that was should be the key goals of completing military operations in the Gulf, but with those 3 key items as a result.